Hey, Josh Morris here with the Everything Paranormal Show. This is the season premiere, the debut, and today we're going to be discussing paranormal investigation teams and, of course, evidence gathering. We're going to be looking at everything from just what is the team to what's good and bad about the team. Also, with evidence gathering techniques, what's good, what's bad, is there fake, is there false, what's all out there. Because, look, in 2004, we began the ghost hunting TV shows trend, and by 2012, actually, there was at least 31 paranormal reality shows aired in the United States. And recent data shows that nearly half of all Americans actually believe in ghosts. A quarter of them have had some type of actual interaction, whether it's seeing a ghost or feeling the presence or something related to an experience. We're talking 25% of America. I mean, you figure, look, if you put the population at around 300 million, we're talking, right, or, 150 million people believe in ghosts. 75 million people have had some type of experience. So there's got to be some truth out there, right? Well, according to paranormalsociety.com, there's over 4,400, paranormal investigation teams registered just in the United States. And out of one of those, joining me today is all the way from Virginia, Paranormal Investigations. Please welcome to the show to co-host with me and special guest, David Ramsey. David, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, Josh. Thank you for inviting me out, to talk on the show. I'm pretty excited to do it. Hopefully it's a good interview.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm excited about it, and certainly we'll dive right in and we'll start talking about these paranormal investigation teams. So clearly, just as we said, there's like 4,400 registered teams, and you got to figure that's just registered teams. I don't even think when I had a team, I don't think it was even registered with paranormalsocieties.com. Yeah. So you got to figure there's probably even more out there not even registered. Mm-hmm. So with that many teams, I mean, what do you make of that?
I think that's a huge number of teams, first off. Now with that said, that could be that's a double-edged sword. It could be a good thing, but it could also be, a bad thing.
Right.
A good thing in the sense that, it shows people are interested, in the field. The bad thing about it is, because you're always going to have those teams that, I don't want to put people on blast, but, people fake
right.
evidence or, maybe not fake evidence, but, try to exaggerate evidence or, make it seem like there's things there that's really not.
Right. See, and that's exactly what you bring up the exact point that I want to dive into is fake, or what I like to call false evidence, right? Mm-hmm. Because I don't always accuse every team of faking evidence.
Yeah.
Right. But I also wonder if, or I know for a fact that sometimes it's false evidence. Sometimes these teams, I just don't think that sometimes they know any better. They see possibly cigarette smoke, things like that, and they're all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is a mist of vapor, and they're not really debunking their own evidence, and instead they glorify it. And I think it's ignorance, and that does not help the profession.
No. You're definitely right on that aspect. You see a lot of, and the common TV shows, they're really guilty of that as well. I mean, whether it's, outright fabrication or whether that's, just accidentally, just ignorance, like you said, or just, really just, for example, the whole thing with, now I might get some pushback for this, but, orbs. That's one of those things that is just, it's so easy when you take a picture to get quote unquote orbs in it.
Right.
And, a lot of these things, like you said, it could be cigarette smoke, it could be, water droplets, it could be, a simple bug, just flying around in the camera shot. and you just happen to get it in your picture. And I feel like when people do this and they jump at every little thing, or they don't really try to debunk things, their own evidence, like you said,
Right.
it kind of just perpetuates that stereotype that everybody that does this is a whack job, and for lack of a more technical term. But I don't, and again, I'm like you. I don't think that all these people are out here intentionally falsifying evidence, but I definitely think that when you jump at things, it's definitely going to hurt some credibility, even if it's unintentional.
So speaking of credibility, do you feel, in your opinion, that the image of a team matters when showing up to a client? Because let's face it, people in our field, in the paranormal field, can be quite eccentric. You can have people all the way from driving the hearse and putting ghost stickers on everything. You know what I mean? They're over the top in that sense, which I'm not going to knock them for, but I'm just saying, does that image, if they show up to a client who needs help, does that hinder them?
Now I'm gonna try to be like you, not to knock anybody out there that does that. But definitely, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of a client or a person calling somebody out there, personally, if I see somebody walking up to my house driving a hearse, having looking like something that came out of a movie, I'm gonna really question. Yeah, I'm gonna be all like, one, are these guys total whack jobs? What did I call out to my house to begin with?
Right.
So definitely appearance, I really think is a really big part of it, because like you said, if I see somebody driving up to my house in a hearse and they got the ghost stickers all over the stuff, I'm gonna be like, well, this guy, one, either they're really devoted, and I'm telling you right now, I'm just putting myself in the shoes of a client or somebody calling them out there. I'm willing to bet not a lot of people are going to be like, oh, they're devoted. They're just going to go say they're crazy.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely appearance, I think, is a really big thing when you're going out to people's houses and stuff like that. And, being on time, too. That's another thing. But definitely appearance. You can't be going out to these investigations looking like I don't even know. Just looking – I don't even have a word for that.
Well, like, yeah, and I understand, and that's the thing, and I think I want to, we'll probably use the term maybe a few more times, but double-edged sword is definitely because I have met in other teams in my years in the past where they were eccentric, but they were knowledgeable. So, and that kind of leads me to the next thing is, what do you feel people should expect? Let's say you're a client and you have a team that shows up. What would you expect from that team?
So are you asking like,
just like how would you expect them to conduct themselves and maybe knowledge-wise, things like that?
I mean, I'm definitely going to expect them, one, to, interview me, ask me some questions, about the experiences. Probably going to, expect them to have some sort of equipment, nothing, they don't have to have anything, super flashy. Right. That, I recognize, stuff's not cheap.
Yeah.
But, just making it look like, you belong there, you at least have some kind of dedication without going, too far over the top. That's a really big thing. But, definitely, trying to do things thoroughly, trying not to jump at every little thing, trying to like debunk things, really just trying to look at things objectively, trying to rationalize things first, but then also coming from the standpoint of saying, okay, well, there's nobody in this room and yet we hear something.
Right.
So yeah, just being objective. Objectivity, in my opinion, goes a long way with that.
Yeah, and my wife just reminded me of something, and sometimes it's just funny when you go to show up to some of these serious situations. there was one of the places that was popularized on television was the St. Augustine Lighthouse, and my wife and I went there for an investigation ourselves, and it was really funny because after a particular televised show went there, they really kind of sold out and had this cheesy ghost tour stuff. They had this. The first thing we saw was just this little blinky ghost, just on this little podium, and it was just I don't know, but because a lot of times when you go to these, you want something a little more serious too, because you want to. It's a little serious in nature. A lot of times you're dealing with ghosts and spirits of people that passed away, or sometimes tragically there's accidents that happen at some of these locations. So I'm not always a big fan of cheesing up, and I might catch a little bit of grief out there too. But look, I'm all about trying to help the client. My wife and I has always been about trying to ease people's minds, and because you may have seen this too already, but sometimes clients are already worked up and they're excited, and sometimes they want evidence to be found. They want certain things, so you may show them some minor stuff and they're blowing it out of proportion. Sometimes you have to kind of burst their bubble and bring them back down. So, but one thing I know with you, since I know a little bit about you now, and I think one thing you may want to explain, I'd like you to explain, is what about that average person like you was that's curious, or maybe writing a term paper, but what about that average person that wants to get into it? What kind of advice would you give them on getting into investigating?
Well, that's a lot of things could go with that. I would honestly probably, the biggest thing that I would have to say, and it sounds kind of bad when I'm first going to say this, but don't expect too much. Don't expect it to be like the shows. Don't expect it to be like the movies. Don't expect it to be anything like that at all. Nothing like that.
Right.
Because if you do, you're really setting yourself up for a lot of failure, a lot of this, maybe not failure, but a lot of disappointment. Because everything, on Ghost Adventures, everything, on TV is real, right? Yeah, definitely. Not trying to put anybody on blast, but definitely when you go out on a lot of these investigations, a lot of times, the people I investigate with, a lot of times, nothing happens, but that doesn't mean that nothing is there. And this is what, we've come to a general consensus. And I mean, it's pretty much true. Just because something doesn't happen while we're there such a short amount of time. We're there maybe, an hour, 2 hours. However, they're there a longer time than we are, a lot longer time than we are. So just because something, doesn't happen, while over the course of our investigation, doesn't mean nothing's there. It just means nothing happened while we were there.
Right.
But
yeah, they're not trained. They're not on cue.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times, you're not going to get anything. You might get, a weird sound on an EVP, or a strange thing in a picture, but you're not going to get that full body apparition like you see in the the TV shows, or you're not going to get, I don't know, pushed down the stairs, or something like that. It's not going to be that action packed. Definitely just go into. But another thing, you should definitely go into it with an open mind, because you definitely never know. Some of the places that you think that, oh yeah, I won't get anything here. If you go in with that mindset, you're not going to get anything there.
Right.
And even if you do get something, you're already in that mindset of, oh well, I'm not going to get anything here anyways. You're going to totally miss things.
Right.
So go into, and this is something that's hard for me too sometimes. Try to go into every place with an open mind. And that's it can be hard to do sometimes, but go into places with an open mind, knowing that anything could happen or nothing could happen, and also go into things knowing that you're okay if nothing happens at all, because you're the whole thing again with us, and I know you stated yourself too, and should be the goal of everybody in my opinion, is to help people out, and to give people some sort of clarity, to show them that, look, you're not crazy. just it's all about helping people,
Exactly. Well, yeah, and a lot of people, because this is, again, when you're talking half the country believe in ghosts and 25% have had some kind of experience. So again, we're talking roughly like 75 million people have had some kind of experience. And that can be very scary for them. Especially when you've got, even though, yes, say 5,000 investigation teams out there may exist, maybe not all of them active, but you figure, look, that's only maybe 10, 12, 15,000 people actively investigating for 75 million people having experiences, so there is that proportion, right? And I think to kind of go back on what I had asked you about people getting into it, I think for me, a big piece of advice I would give is mentor. Find some experienced investigators. Don't just run out and start your own group when you don't have experience. Like if you've been around it and you've researched and you've studied enough and then you want to start a group, I would say go ahead and do that. It's good to have a group. You always want to have a few other people that will be objective and maybe have different points of view. Maybe you'll hear an EVP, you'll hear it say one thing, they'll hear it say another, and then you'll go, wait a minute, maybe you're right. And so it's always good to have that bounce back, but it's really good to have that mentorship as well. And that's something I think, I'm sure you probably are finding with Jeff and them over there. And I've watched some of your guys' investigations on your YouTube channel. I think they're good. I really do. I think you guys are pretty level-headed. You see different people. Some people get so excited and they're hyped up and they're just all about it.
Yeah.
And you guys seem to really take a good approach, much like, my wife and I and our team when we used to do that. So speaking of getting into capturing evidence for people, what are some of the evidence gathering techniques out there that should be at least the minimum for teams?
So the bare minimum that I would, bare minimum. So I would honestly say, now you don't need this, but I would strongly suggest this, a camera. And it doesn't have to be anything, doesn't have to be super flashy, it doesn't have to be, some $1,000 camera, but, a camera just to the bare minimum, and phone cameras, it's a camera, so just a camera, because you're going to want to document stuff, you're going to want to tag some stuff, you're going to can't even talk. You're going to want to record the investigation, and it's always helpful to have one of those. And another thing that I would say that's pretty basic, I think you can get these at the store for around $10 maybe to $25, so they're not really expensive. Digital voice recorders,
right,
for conducting EVP sessions, and again, I don't know how accurate they are, but there's I'm sure phone apps for that. I don't know how accurate those are. Yeah. So it's just disclaimer out there, but that's another avenue I guess you could take, but they're not that expensive. They're like
right.
$10.
I would even interject in there real quick too that I think the cheap ones probably will be better because most of the cheaper ones may not have that noise cancellation, so you'll be able to do the white noise better. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I didn't even think about that. Definitely a camera, definitely a digital voice recorder. Now this one, you could argue that this isn't required. I would honestly say a type of equipment called the Spirit Box, or piece of equipment called Spirit Box.
Spirit Box has been very popular in the last few years, especially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for anybody out there that's not familiar with what a Spirit Box is, it's basically essentially it's a radio, and it just sweeps through AM or FM stations. It sweeps forward or in reverse, and you can set the rate at which it sweeps through stations, and it's theorized that that spirits, they communicate through radio waves, and you can either, there's a whole bunch of retailers that sell specifically made ones,
right,
or ghost hunting, and oh man, this totally goes into a separate thing about that.
Right.
I really question the validity of things that are specifically made for ghost hunting. I strongly question that, but that's
when you get random words injecting into this system, I've always been on the fence as well. I think for me, and just to kind of throw a name out there, like Steve Huff, if you've ever heard of Huff Paranormal, you know, he's got probably some of the best spirit boxes out there that he makes himself. And, you know, even his seem to have an intellectual conversation, though. That's the only thing that steers me in a pro side of it. But at the same time, I've always been a little on the fence of it. I'm a big EVP fan. I'm a big EVP fan. Spirit boxes, I'm still on the fence. But anyways, go ahead.
And I almost totally forgot about this piece, and it's ironic that I forgot about this piece because it's the piece of equipment that I work with a lot. EMF detectors. Yes. I don't even know why I would go over that. You know, almost totally forget about that. That's a huge piece.
Because you're on a show.
Yeah.
We're gonna forget stuff.
EMF detectors. They're definitely. I definitely say that's a piece that you definitely need to have, and they it's basically just a tool that measures electromagnetic fields, and it's theorized that spirits give off these fields, but also, you know, electronics and other appliances they do as well. So that's why, you know, during the course of investigations, that's part of my job is going baselines, you know, going through the house, finding out where certain hot spots are. So, you know, if something occurs during the actual course of the investigation that wasn't tagged during the baseline, that has to be noted, you know, what that is. Another thing that I would suggest, now this is another thing that I'm going to get a lot of pushback, but I'm going to say it anyways. Well, you could use these for a variety of purposes. Flashlights.
Flashlights?
Definitely flashlights. One, the obvious reason, seeing in the dark or wherever. You know, you gotta have a flashlight, you know, whether that's on your phone or whatever, but gotta have that. But also, I'm not sure of the exact, it might be a specific word for it, or it might just be called the flashlight technique. Now this has been debunked, okay, but my team will use this in a different way. What we do is we get, I think we have about 3 flashlights. You can have any number of them, but 2 or 3 seems like a good number. And they're each different colors. You can have a red one, you know, a blue one, a green one. And now again, this has been debunked, but I'm going to clarify that. So what you do is you twist the bottom of it so that it's barely, it's in between like the on and off position.
Right.
And it used to be theorized that spirits could communicate with flashlights. Well, that's been debunked because when you do that, the swelling of the battery eventually causes the light to come on.
Right.
Well, we've managed, and I don't really know personally of any that we've had much success with using them, but other teams could have had different experiences. To get around this a little bit, what you can do, and now, you know, take this with a grain of salt, but if you have 3 different color flashlights, a red one, a blue one, a green one, or whatever, you can get around this by saying, light up the green one or light up the red one, then do this, this, and this. So it's like a sequence. And it doesn't have to be a large sequence, but when you get stuff that's so connected, it starts to rule out the possibility that it's just a battery swelling. But again, you know, you do have to take into consideration, you know, it could just be that. But chances are, if it's spot on pretty consistently, you know, again, you could really have something there. Now, the final thing that I would say, and this isn't really a thing, this is more of a category of things. I would say, now this isn't bare minimum by any means. This is just something interesting to have. I would say probably trigger objects. Those things are pretty interesting.
Okay.
Now, what trigger objects?
So give some examples for our viewers.
Trigger objects, you could use, let's say you're dealing with, you're in a particular location, and it's child spirits or something like that. You could use something as simple as a ball, or something as simple as like a teddy bear, something that connects with what you're investigating. And it's theorized that, that connection, the entity might interact with that particular object. It might happen, it might not, but in any case, it's definitely a cool thing to have, and definitely a useful thing to have. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Right.
So I would definitely, that's just an extra thing, but it's something that I've, we think is pretty useful, pretty interesting to take out onto investigations.
Now, on tools, still talking about tools here, there's a variety of people that feel that they should be doing Ouija boards as well. How do you feel about that?
Oh, man. So, in short, absolutely not.
Right.
I
agree.
I do not touch those. I will not touch those. Ouija boards, absolutely not. I just, from personal experience, I haven't really, experienced anything, particularly like, oh, the house was shaking or something really malevolent like that. But I just really think you're inviting some bad energy when you decide to engage in that.
Right.
And whether people out there, whether you're religious or not, I personally would not want to just say that. To me, that's like saying, waving a flag, saying, okay, yeah, I'm totally inviting anything negative to come attract. And no, religious or not, no.
Right. And I agree with that, and I think another thing to add for people that watch this is understand that a Ouija board is simply a tool, and you don't have to necessarily go buy one. They can be made from paper. They can be made, you can use a variety. There's other methods of simple things, of even writing down yes, no, and trying to have spirits, move things or move objects, move homemade like planchettes. You can still create a version of that, but it's your actions also are inviting and can open that up as well. So I would caution people out there to be cautious. Don't really get into that. If you need help spiritually, contact a professional. But you know what I mean? Get a hold of a team that's nearby. I mean, there's obviously like 5,000, like 100 per state. So there's probably a team nearby. So then the other thing I wanted to talk to, another thing I just remembered too, is so many people are used to the TV shows, right? And every show, it's lights off, infrared. But now, that's not true, is it?
Oh no, that's actually pretty far from the truth. Now, I really think that these shows, they just do it for the cinematic effect, or just for the effect of it, make it look cool. But what my team does, when we interview the client, we ask, well, what are the conditions like when it normally happens?
Right.
And we try to replicate those the same environment. So, if it happens with the lights on and the TV on, well, maybe not the TV on, because you want to have
clean audio.
Yeah, exactly. But if it happens with the lights on, then why would we need the lights off?
Right.
So it's all done, all the TV stuff, it's all they do everything for the effect, everything to make it look cool. But the reality is, things don't happen, only at night. We find out a lot of things happen just in the course of the the afternoon.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to happen at 3 o'clock in the morning, or 12 o'clock at night or something like that. It happens whenever, and we try to replicate those same environmental conditions. over the course of our investigations.
Yeah, and I think we were the same way. We had done both. We had done both. Lights off, lights on.
Yeah.
There's always that type of stuff. And now, one thing I love is confirmation. I love confirmation on things. It's amazing to have that. And just to share a quick story of one of our investigations, we had to do an investigation at an antique mall. Again, don't want to name any names, but what was really cool about it is that we showed up to this place, and the clients were so excited to have us there, and they're just like, oh, and as soon as we walk in, they're like, we're not going to tell you anything. We're not going to tell you anything. We're just going to hand you, and they handed us like a hand-drawn map of the place. Like all the booths, and stuff. And they said, you just go around and whatever you feel, you just mark down the locations, And so we walked around and we stopped at multiple places. And I think we ended up marking 3 spots because my wife's very sensitive. She really could detect the energies and everything. And, between my wife and I's conversation, we kind of privately went around and tried to be very discreet about it. And we went to multiple locations. We marked 3 on the map. So we come back, and they had already had a map that they had drawn ahead of time and had marked out the exact 3 spots. So I think things like that are really cool when that happens, in the paranormal world. It shows you that those energies do translate from that there is something there. There's something tangible. And that and if you're sensitive, if you can pick up on those energies, it's a real thing. So I just think that's really cool. Have you personally had any kind of confirmations happen to you?
As far as trying to think of anything.
Because I know you're still fairly new in the big scheme of, you're a young guy, but.
Oh yeah. I've only been doing it, I think maybe going on the 2nd year. Now, personally, I'm trying to think of any. Well, we would have asked. Well, here's some confirmation things. We would ask questions, on the spirit box, and you get. Because it's hooked up to a speaker and you get answers, whether that's radio static or whatever, but you get, feedback immediately, instantaneously. So definitely when you're asking questions and you're going to get, the typical, radio chatter that, interjects itself. But if you're asking a particular question and you get a name of somebody, like if you ask, who am I communicating with or something like that, and you get a name come through and you ask, maybe later on that, am I communicating with such and so, or what's your name? And you get the same response.
Right.
That's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool. Now, as far as, that happening all the time, it definitely doesn't happen all the time. But, just little things, man, like that, that are really interesting and really cool, just make it all the more wild. Because personally, I don't like getting stuff, I wouldn't like getting stuff every time I go out because it would just get boring. To me it would, I wouldn't, because if I'm saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna get something, going to this one.
But I try to get something every time.
Yeah, exactly. You definitely want to try every time, but if you got personally for me, if I got something every single time, I would kind of just lose my drive to want to do it. But the fact is that, if I'm going out to, all these different places and I'm, trying my best to try to get something, and you're never going to know what you're going to get or, when you're going to get something, it makes everything, it just makes it all the more worthwhile,
Right. Now, when you personally joined Virginia Paranormal, and, I'm sure you were probably more toward the skeptical side of things, I guess. Again, I'm not sure exactly where you fit in that, but what was the first piece of evidence that you ever, when you seen it or heard it, you said, whoa, what was that for you?
Now, are you talking about specifics?
Yeah, what was the first time that you just was like, okay, there's something to this?
Well, I would probably have to say I'm trying to think of well, here's one. There's two specific ones. The one was a little bit more recent, and that wasn't really saying, wow, there's something to this. That was more solidifying. I would say the first piece of evidence, it was probably one of my, maybe not one of my first, definitely one of the, probably during the first years, definitely during the first year, maybe even the first 2 months I was doing it. We were at a location at a house, middle of nowhere. Um, and I really didn't think that we were going to get anything. I really didn't think we were going to get anything at all. It was quiet the entire night. So I was kind of, bummed out because, I was relatively new to it. And we went down to the basement, and we did an EVP session down there, and, we didn't get anything because we didn't, when, after the investigations, few days later, put it into a program, and they analyze it. I got a text, one day saying that, hey, we got the results from such and so's investigation, and I was like, okay. It was a full-fledged conversation in the background on the digital voice recorder, and
nice.
Yeah, and we were the only ones there. And it was pretty surreal that the fact that we were in that same room and we didn't hear anything, and
right.
there's nobody else in the house talking. It was only, I believe the client was he was at home. Yeah, it was just him and us. It was just surreal getting that confirmation, getting that evidence that this is pretty interesting stuff. Like it was just one of the things, and for skeptical people, they're going to try to attribute it to a lot of things, and you just can't. I mean, there was nothing.
There's never enough evidence for the skeptic.
Yeah, and definitely a certain level of skepticism is healthy, but some people, I mean, that was just one of those things you could not attribute to anything. The TV was not on. Nobody was talking. It was just crazy.
Right.
And you cannot attribute that to anything else. And it was in the middle of nowhere, so it's not like it was conversation, on the street or something. So it was just one of those things that kind of was really eye-opening. I was just like, wow, like this is pretty legitimate stuff. And this is just, for lack of a better term, this is just really cool. I mean,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, speaking of EVPs, it's my personal favorite. In all honesty. Over the years, it just seemed like there was many years when I was trying to photo everything. I was always trying to photo, maybe videotape stuff.
Yeah.
The equipment wasn't as good back in the day, but it just always seemed like photos were always pixelated or grainy or, just out of focus or whatever. It was, I really hated to try to provide evidence of pixelated faces and things like that. It was always hard for me to kind of justify it, right?
Yeah.
And when the very first time that I got an EVP, and it blew my mind. It really pushed me closer to believing. I tell people, but I think for me, it was like, it was in my own home. It was my wife and I, and we had pressed record, and I think I wasn't ready just yet. I had said something, I can't even remember, and then there was some silence. And when we did end up doing a session, we turned, that was only like a 30-second recording, and then we ended up doing like a 20-minute EVP session. Mm-hmm. Well, when I went back and was playing it through my headphones, I had it cranked up, and it was like in that first 30-second clip, that file that was only 30 seconds long. Mm-hmm. And I had a great EVP. It was like, and the thing is when you're in your own home, everything's controlled. You turned off everything. There's like nothing going on in the house. It's dead silent. And so then when you go back, just like a science, it's a controlled environment. And when you go back to that recording, and all of a sudden you hear a child's voice, And even there was like a little scuffle, and you even hear a man actually yell at the top of his lungs after that, like a word. We can't to this day really make out the word. Maybe someday I'll show it or play it for people. But I've got a bunch of them. I still keep them on CD somewhere. But in any case, it's just one of our favorites because it was one of our first. And it was just, to me, it blew me away, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was like, whoa, we just were like, you just get goosebumps. And that would happen every time we do investigations. My wife and I, where we used to live in Florida, we used to have this office where we had computers in each corner. And so a lot of times we'd be reviewing evidence. She might be looking over photos. I might be listening to EVPs, and I would have it cranked up on my speakers. And so we both would kind of listen. And it's so funny because when you hear it, it's like both of us just stop what we're doing, and the goosebumps, the hairs, all of that. It's just chilling. And I don't think what people realize is that EVPs, like, I spent some time trying to debunk them. I used to try to whisper in the room, set the recorder down, whisper to it, try to say ghostly things, get out, whatever.
Yeah.
But for the people that are the seasoned vets, when you've listened to enough recordings and you start to realize that the fake voices, the fake whispering, the things, you can hear, you can tell that. It's almost like it's above the layer of the white noise. You can hear somebody whispering in the room. It's fake. When you hear a real EVP, it's like in another layer. It's out of the white noise itself or within that layer. And that's how you know the difference. It's amazing. It really is. It's creepy but exhilarating. There's all of those emotions. And a lot of people, in fact, just the other day, I had people showing me pictures and like, every time this ghost, they have a lot of things going on in their trailer, and they show me the pictures, and I said, look, don't run for your camera, run for a recorder. I tell people, hey, don't even worry about trying to photo. I mean, even if you got a fairly decent picture of a ghost, most people don't even believe that anymore anyways. But EVPs, to me, are some of the best evidence techniques that we seem to be capturing on a regular basis. I mean, how do you feel about EVPs?
I mean, I honestly, I take the same stance as you. That's probably my favorite, it's kind of tied with the Spirit Box, but I would definitely say it's either Spirit Box or the EVPs. It's definitely my favorite way to gather evidence. It's definitely really cool to be able to just to listen to EVPs. We listen to this one client. I believe they lived right across the street, I think, from a battlefield. And they were really into it, into the paranormal and stuff like that. And they,
I bet, you almost have to be then.
Yeah, seriously, yeah. They were showing us some EVPs that they had gotten, and it was pretty strange stuff. And just to piggyback kind of off of what you said about EVPs. Just the other week, maybe 2 weekends ago or something like that, within the last 2 or 3 weeks,
right.
I actually got a text last night from our team leader, Jeff. He had sent me a clip of the EVP of an EVP session that we did a few weeks ago. I was in a room by myself conducting a EVP session. And there's no noise at all in that room. I was not talking, or besides asking questions. And there's nobody else in that room. There's no TV, nothing like that. Fairly quiet house. Everybody else was in a different room, quiet as well, And as I'm asking this question, at the very end, you can hear, and I listened to it. I've listened to it a handful of times. It's a growl or something. It's something really inaudible. It's something though.
Right.
and I showed it to my mom, and I was like, "What, do you hear this?" And well, it's pretty evident you can hear something, but I think it was Linda, one of either Jeff or Linda, I can't remember which one. They were trying to say that they were saying that like it says like it's sounding it says like it sounds like it's saying something, and you can kind of hear it,
Right.
but it's really inaudible. It's really it's strange.
Right.
So definitely like what you said, you get like a whole mix of emotions like when you hear stuff.
Because
Kinda like,
it's not there when you're doing it
yeah.
live. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's hard for people to grasp sometimes. When it's easier when they sit back, and if you put the evidence out there for public, well, when they're a skeptic already, it's easy for them to just to say, "Oh, that was like your stomach growling," or "Oh, that was this,"
Yeah.
or "That was that." But when you're there, and that's
Yeah.
why I tell people all the time, the best thing you can do if you're on the borderline is grab a recorder. I mean, I don't feel like that's something that's going to bring any harm to people if they just do some EVP sessions. Obviously, for if if you're just asking questions, if you start inviting stuff, and just always be careful. Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So so yeah, I mean, I think that by all means, I love EVPs. I think they're the most purest thing for capturing evidence. Versus, now I know you like spirit boxes. Again, I'm still a little on the fence about them, only because of the wording technology involved, and that does scare me a little bit. And I know that there's some intelligible responses, and I think that helps me to justify that. But I still think that for me, EVPs still have that purity to them, where it's just the recording, is recording what's there, and you're there. You know it's quiet. You go back, and you can clearly tell some voices. There is that all the time. One thing I want to throw out to the chat, because we do have a few viewers out there, but if you have any questions for David and I, go ahead and put those in the chat here in a little bit, and we'll try to maybe answer a question or two. But if not, one thing I want to cover while people might be coming up with some questions is, what about some preparatory rituals or post-investigation rituals? Is that something that you guys partake in as an investigation team, or is that something that you encourage or that you'd like to pass on to people? What are your thoughts about that?
So controversial to a lot of people. I know a lot of people, they do a lot of pre and post investigation rituals. Just to be completely honest, we don't really do too much of that. We don't. I mean, a quick prayer, or if it's something particularly malevolent, or something that we have some weird vibes going into it, we'll definitely say a longer prayer or something like that. But really, as far as really strong rituals, not really. Now, I would definitely encourage anyone to say a quick prayer before and after. But we don't really focus too much on that. And I've never really had any negative experience so far. Knock on wood. Knock
Right.
on wood. During or after an investigation. But I would definitely, if you definitely feel uncomfortable, or you definitely feel the need to, it can't hurt. I mean, to engage
Sure.
in that pre or post investigation ritual. But as far as and me personally, if I'm getting like some really weird vibes, or I'm getting something like, okay, yeah, there's something, I shouldn't be here, or something like that, I will definitely say some prayers about that. And that it really alleviates any negative feeling then. And like I said, I don't really focus too much on pre and post investigation rituals, besides a simple prayer or a quick prayer. But I personally think that suffices enough. But I know a lot of groups at these conventions and these different shows and stuff. They've come up to us, and they've asked this about the same thing, and I say the exact same thing, that we don't do too much of that besides prayers and stuff
Right.
like that. and a lot of people they're kind of stunned. A lot of people because they're really involved in it, and by all means, like I said, if you feel the need to do that, yeah, definitely, it won't hurt anything. But just we're not too involved with that. But I know a lot of people in a lot of groups. I've heard a lot of things that a lot of people do engage in stuff like that, and definitely, again, if you feel the need to, don't hesitate to engage in that. It can't hurt.
Right. Now, speaking a little bit of, I want to touch upon what you brought up
Yep.
with the conventions and meeting other teams and things like that, is egos.
Oh yeah.
First of all, I've got to say, when I reached out to you guys, when I reached out to you guys, I gotta say, Jeff was amazing.
Yeah.
Very super nice guy. I've dealt with
He's a great
multiple
guy.
investigation teams, and I gotta say, Jeff's super great guy, and I gotta say, you are too. You're a very good good young man. I really you've been so good to work with me ahead of time as we prepped for this. So I really gotta to shout out to Virginia investigation. Paranormal investigation teams. What do you call it? You guys call yourself Vapey? Vappy?
Oh man, VAPI.
Maybe you'll send me a T-shirt, man. But no, I think that's awesome. And it looks like there's a question from Virginia Paranormal. It says, "We've always wondered why do ghosts wear clothes?" So there you go, David. How's now? And this is coming from your team, so I don't know if I should take this or you, but I'll let you have a crack at this. What do you think? What's your theory?
Oh man, we've always wondered why do ghosts wear clothes. I'm that's a stumper. I mean,
Because nobody wants to see a ghost penis.
In all honesty, like. That's one of those questions I'm like, I don't really know. I'm like, because that's one of those things. I'm like, I don't know. Like, ask the ghost. Like ask them, why are they wearing clothes? Like, personal preference, I guess. But in all seriousness, I guess, if it's something like residual, then it's probably going to appear in the same sense that this is my personal theory. If it's appearing in some of the same conditions that it left this Earth, and it's probably going to appear in some similar attire. That's just my personal take on that. But yeah, your take on that is definitely as well. You don't want to see a ghost naked.
Well,
that's kind of weird.
Look, I've always been a huge believer that the spirit world is energy based. It's certainly with all the EMF, everything that investigations have shown, one of the common themes is energy. Whether it's battery drains, cold spots, all the different things, all seems to be energy based. We've seen the science, the fact that when we pass away, when we physically die, science has proved our energy, the energy in our body, still lives on indefinitely. So, with that being said, as you go into the spiritual plane, let's just say you don't move on to the next step. Let's just say you're in the spiritual plane. Ghosts communicate through a variety of means. And, whether they physically manifest, which may take a lot of energy, but I'm sure that if they're going to communicate to you, they're going to probably use an appearance, something that you can recognize and say, hey, that's a person with clothes. And again, maybe what they're wearing, their attire, to give you the clues of their time period, who they are, male, female, things like that. Or they could be trying to trick you. We do have some negative stuff that happens, right? Some malevolent stuff. But ultimately, they're trying to communicate. Now, I also believe that there is psychomanifestation where they can use the energy, which I don't want to get into too much depth. We'll cover that on some future side videos and maybe even some episodes. But ultimately, our brains have energy, right? So there's they can use some of your actual energy in your mind to where you can actually see them quickly or something, much like a hallucination where you might think you see it and you ask them, hey, did you see that? No, I didn't see that. because they were able to use your mind energy to do that as well. So again, it's an image. So I hope that answers the question. Looks like Ashley Duke asks, what's been your favorite ghost site? So David, what's been your favorite site?
Okay, so for me personally, that's a pretty easy one. I would honestly have to say up at the Wildwood Sanitarium up in upstate New York. That place, not only is it's a really cool place. You know how it looks, the appearance of the place. It's really interesting. I mean, it literally looks like, when you're looking up at the place, it literally looks like the stereotypical haunted house. Like it's I mean, like it's such a great, I don't even know, like I just love that place. Like the whole trip, you know, going up to New York was just great. And just like, honestly, that's also where I personally, and you know, we all experienced something pretty cool up there. We were up at the very top floor of the building, and I think we were wrapping up our investigation, or I can't quite remember that, but we decided to really just power down everything, and just sit in, you know, silence, and just see what happens. You know, see if we hear anything, see what happens. And the only thing we had running, I believe, was the digital voice recorder. And we just sat in silence. And the only other person besides the entire team was in a room, same room. And the only other person that was in the whole building, and I believe the building was three or four stories tall. She was down at the very bottom, and she was asleep for the majority of the investigation. And she was very quiet, anyways. But it was just, we literally sat there in silence probably for 10 or 15 minutes. And within just a few minutes, you can actually hear. And we, not only did we sit in silence, we closed our eyes and we just sat there, and you can actually hear, and it was crazy. You could actually hear faint music and faint voices coming from the story directly below us.
Right.
And that was probably the coolest thing that I've probably ever experienced. And even people out there, you know, that, you know, they definitely don't believe in, you know, this type of stuff. That is just one of those things that, wherever you fall out on that skepticism or, you know, believer scale, it was just one of those things you really can't explain. And it was really cool. It was just really a surreal experience to get to see that. And Jeff, dude, you know, he's watching right now, so I want to go back up there eventually. It was a great trip up there.
You hear that, Jeff? You see, we already got a request in.
Mm-hmm.
Go to New York. I think for me, I don't know if it's a specific investigation. I think for me, there's so many moments in the time frames that we've done things. Mm-hmm. There's moments I love, you know, and I mean, I've had some great moments, even just in my own home in Florida and some places. But I think overall, if I could speak for my wife too, maybe I think our favorite location wise may have been like St. Augustine area. The lighthouse investigation was kind of cheesy and sort of a dud, and we actually didn't get no evidence. The only evidence we got out of the entire St. Augustine lighthouse, investigation was actually sitting in our truck. And it started raining toward the end, and my wife was frustrated. We were like, we could just tell there was just nothing. And it's like, she just said something like, hey, is there any spirits out here? And then in the white noise later, when we got back home, we found there was a spirit that responded and said, help me get out. So even the spirit was wanting to get out. But yeah, I mean, I just think that all in all, and like you said earlier, and you know, ghosts don't work on cues. So, but I think that St. Augustine, because we had walked around the town, we had been around the old fort, but there's just an energy to the place. And I know it's one of the oldest cities, right? One of the first cities in America. But you can feel that history. You can feel that palpable energy in that. So I think to me, it was more of an area of, and I would love to go back to there. And I don't know if you guys have gone there, but that should be something you guys should think about too, because it's so rich and full of old spirit energy that's been around and that accumulation. So I always recommend that to people. It's just got a cool vibe to it, that mystical vibe. Even though we didn't get a lot of evidence from there, it just has that great vibe, and I would love to go back there. So Ashley Duke again says, wow, so rad. What's your favorite thing about ghost hunting?
Oh man, that's a pretty good one. It's gonna take me a second. I would really honestly say, now this is just for me personally. My favorite thing is probably the people that I go out with, and I do this with. I'll just be completely honest. They're some of my favorite people. I mean, like, there's some really I consider them pretty close friends of mine. Just getting to go out, getting to, go on these road trips, getting to go to these cool historical sites, getting to, do these really cool things that, the majority of people never get to do, never get to see, getting it to do with such, cool and great people, like, I don't even know. It's just something, really special. And it's something, that it's just something really cool that, God blessed me with personally, that, such a cool group of people to do it with. And, I'd honestly say also probably just the road. I love the road trips, and this is all intertwined, the people, the road trips, and, it's everything about it's just really cool. And again, like I've seen and I've interacted and met some people and been to some places that some small towns like out in Virginia that I would never have been to.
Right.
Never even heard of if I didn't do this, and just getting to see so much of the state that I've never seen before, and just getting to see and getting to talk to just all these different kinds of people and from all just different kinds of backgrounds. It's just really cool. It's kind of eye-opening to get to hear like all the different stories and just get to do it with some really cool people along the way. So definitely shout out Jeff and Linda. You guys are pretty rad.
Yeah, and you guys need to come out here to the mountains on out on the southwest side of Virginia, where we're at. The mountains are there's some haunted howlers out here, that's for sure. That's definitely for sure. So, but I think I would say for me the favorite things, I would actually have to probably back you up on what you talk about. I think there's a combination of one, just that bonding when you go out with a team. These were moments that even for, like I said, my wife is a great partner of mine. So for that was always even more bonding in our relationship, to share that together, to go out and you have that special trip. There's an excitement to it. And then sometimes you get to go sort of behind the scenes with history. And that's what's really cool, is you get access to some of these locations that sometimes off limits to public, or sometimes they're just some of these old homes that are not even for the public. It's a private residence and they have old stuff and old history. It's really cool to be around that, to just be around that in period. I know a lot of people think, that the investigating the spirits, I mean, that of course is the passion, but the fun stuff, the byproduct of it, is to be around the history, I think, and that's what I really love about ghost hunting. So, so David, is there anything you wanted to sort of wrap up? You want to do any kind of shout out to your team? You guys got anything special planned coming up?
I'm trying to think. Anything special coming up? I I don't want to like advertise here, but check out Jeff's book, The Ghosts of Yorktown. That's a really cool.
Plug in Jeff's book.
Oh yeah, definitely had to do that. But I don't really. I know that we definitely have some more investigations coming up. I think probably maybe not every weekend, maybe every other weekend. So definitely just tune in to Virginia Paranormal's, our Instagram. We have Facebook, our YouTube channel as well. Just for some cool investigations. And also, we put a lot of stuff on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Some funny stuff, some stuff that's not really for hardcore paranormal, but it's all connected, right? So
No, it's good
more.
stuff. It's good stuff.
Oh,
You guys regularly post. I like that.
oh
For the
yeah,
most part, like, and it's not just it's quality. Not just
yeah,
quantity.
exactly.
Absolutely. Well, that's good to hear. Ashley did pop in. She did ask about advising a newcomer. I'm not sure if you were here in the beginning, Ashley, but if you want to go back and rewatch this once it's posted on YouTube, we actually did cover that earlier, where we gave a little bit of advice to newcomers in the ghost hunting world. And I think the summary, just to kind of advise you on that, would be find a mentor. Find somebody that you can join a team, or people that may have a little bit more experience in that, and you can sort of get involved through their team, and a lot of them will take you out on investigations, take you under their wing, and teach you those type of things. So I think that's probably the summary. But other than that, yeah, I think I've really enjoyed the show. I really want to say thank you again, David, for showing up and doing this with me. For those of you watching out there, either live or in the future, we're going to be doing this once a week for, we're going to do it in seasons. It was not going to be 52 weeks a year. But I've got a lot of great shows lined up this season. I do believe next episode we will be talking about some ancient civilization stuff. And even after that, I've got another special guest lined up for religion and paranormal. So that's going to be a hot topic for sure. So I'm really excited for that. In fact, I know he's interacted. This special guest has interacted with you guys a little bit lately on Facebook. So I'm really, really excited. So for those of you, like I said, we're going to try to do this every Thursday around 11:30 p.m. So for those of you in the future, click subscribe if you haven't. Hit that notification bell, and we'll see you in the future. You guys have an awesome evening. Thank you for joining us today.